Hello and welcome to another episode of Alan Writes. This time we'll be continuing on with the previous story that we began. It's called Lightning Strikes, apparently. I like that title a little bit. Just a little bit. And in this we had a woman of an indeterminate age who just had news that her father had died in a lightning strike. A one in a million thing, etc., etc. And when she goes to see the body to do whatever it is she has to do over there, just I'd say an hour away, if that. Well, maybe a little more. Who knows? That isn't set in stone, and it's not even outlined yet. So we'll move on with that. When she goes to deal with the death and is busy trying to work through all of her feelings, her own car gets struck by lightning as she travels, and obviously that's quite a coincidence. So we'll do a little bit of outlining here. Is it coincidence? Is the first juncture that we have to we will eventually have to deal with, and it's better to sort things out before than after, but there's also an element of creation involved with trying to figure out where this story is going and having fun, essentially, creatively, in where it travels. So, is it coincidence? If not, why not? And if yes, then so what? So we have to figure out what is the story here? Is it a woman trying to work through the sudden and untimely demise of her father? Which is a big enough story where she's trying to figure out why do these things happen, etc. And this would make for a decent romantic tale or a short tale about grief. Um, and when I mean romantic tale, I mean she meets somebody, they fall in love over this incident, and they work things out together as far as the way death works. Um, and if it's not, it's a short story about her grieving, which is okay. It's not a tale most people necessarily directly enjoy. It's got a special flavor for people at different times in their life. But the important part is, unless you're writing for an audience, don't write for your audience. You've got to write something that you're going to enjoy, and then hopefully they are going to enjoy. If you try to set out to make a crowd pleaser, you can often end up like not enjoying what you're writing, and then that shows in the art. But of course, sometimes you have to pay the bills, and sometimes you do things on commission, and you really aren't terribly enthused. You have to find that enthusiasm wherever it may lie. I've worked on a number of projects where I'm like, it's okay, but I don't really enjoy it. That would be things like, what was it? The director is Rob Underhill. He's an independent. He's done a number of small things. Um, Things like Fever Dreams and Henry Box Brown, and there's one about Hemingway. Oh, what was it called? Anyway, um, it was something to do with education. Okay, well, there's all of that, but where do we go from here, and how is this going to? Because to be honest, she's worked through what she thinks is is what happened here, where she's gone through all the stages. She's sort of forced herself through it, and she's going to think that she's adjusted, but she hasn't really. That's the problem with grief, is you don't just work through it. You don't just press through it. It will if you think, well, no, I'm done grieving for him. It will keep ambushing you at various times. You have to cry completely before that your tears will dry, sort of thing. All right. Outlining is a coincidence, not okay. If it's not coincidence, which genre does it belong to? All right. This is often my go-to of like, well, what's this story kind of if what does this story belong to? If it's sci-fi, would would be there's some sort of natural attractant or mad scientist, possible time travel, or dimensional travel. Which brings up an interesting thought where we're wondering, was her father really killed? I mean, after a lightning strike, all you'd have would be a of that magnitude. I mean, people survive lightning strikes, but if he's utterly killed, there's the chance that the body burned beyond recognition. Only ID or the like. Was he ID'd by his car nearby? Which means her father might still be alive, which is a twist. I mean, it's a twist the audience can kind of see coming. Or if he did die, but not permanently. So, possible dimensional travel. With sci-fi, he could have been a lightning strike was him being uploaded to the cloud, so to speak. Literally, figuratively. It works for fantasy. It works for sci-fi. There's a lot of bleed over between the two, and that's just the way it is, because they're kissing cousins in terms of genres. Lightning strike was him being uploaded to the cloud, etc. So we've got a whole bunch of sciencey reasons of why why this might have happened. Fantasy is, of course, there's always another world, secret cabal, mystic powers, and ancient forces. That'll cover a lot of things of like why this is happening and why they might seek them out. Trying to kill basically father and daughter. If you want to go the full Wizard of Oz route, she's heir to abilities, storm-like or otherwise. The lightning was accidental? That's possible. I mean, unmastered powers caused the strikes. So unmastered powers caused the strikes because cosmic situations have changed. Essentially, someone did something in the world, and there's more magic, or there's more whatever you want to call the stuff that's where it takes the place of magic. There's more of it available, and those who have the talent but have never had the opportunity to use it suddenly have the opportunity but not the skill. So the talent have the opportunity but not skill, and that's a bad. So this would be taking place basically all across the world, where people would be dying in unusual and gruesome ways, probably. To be honest, that's what happens when you're basically the first wizards, and which would be a bad title. First wizards. Okay, so that's fantasy. Now, a more mundane route is, of course, the ever-popular romance route. She meets grieving. She meets a number of mates, potential mates. unlike previous lovers and such, she has perspective. She has perspective now because her grief's going to give her distance. Gives her distance to analyze what she wants from a relationship. So there's this possibility. So she'd be able to work through what she's doing. It's a very much a Jane Austen thing where you're trying to figure out, well, who's best for me, and if assuming money isn't the thing that matters most, it's who really cares about you, who they are really, trying to find out more about mates rather than simply I'm attracted to this person, I better sleep with them. Because that seems to be the way things work. Uh, you, most women go through at least one mate that's like that, where they're attracted, but they're attracted to something that the mate appears to be rather than what they are. Thus is the cycle of life. If you've married your childhood sweetheart, congratulations, you are the exception. Grief gives her distance to analyze what she wants from a relationship. So we have the sheriff's deputy, basically the first to get her, to come and get her. The first. Who comes to get her. We can have the coroner. We can have the meteorologist / scientist. Meteorologist, studies cities. I think they're called something else. Anyway, there's 3 of them. I'm not sure. Well, we've got a good array of potential mates. We've got very much the duty-bound one who's very much in the judging category of things. We have somebody who's in I'm using the Myers-Briggs scale just because it's a quick and easy breakdown of personality types. It doesn't fit everybody, and in fact, they say right there that people often slip between personality types. They simply have a favored one that they choose to execute for most of the time. For example, right now I'm operating as an artist because I'm doing an act of creation, but really beneath it all, I'm sort of an engineer and idealist, working in different layers. But that's enough about me. So the sheriff's deputy would be we'll call SJ. The coroner is almost certainly an NT, which leaves an interesting question about the. So is this going to be an NF or SP? Now the our artistic scientists are very interesting sorts, insofar as they can certainly know how to sell ideas, and often they're working, like you could say Nikola Tesla, for example, was an NT at heart, but he knew how to sell his ideas, so he would operate as an SP, as a sensing perceiving individual. He'd be an artist, as he's like, then this is my product. This is electricity. This is alternating current, and it will change the world, and it did. He never really got the money that he was looking for. I don't think he was really looking for money, to be honest. But he was looking to advance certain projects, which he was unable to do because he didn't have the money. So, alternatively, they're an idealist who's trying to find the primal connections to the world, basically how things work, and what have you. With basically, it's like a unified theory for the universe, except you're trying to find how like lightning relates, or storms relate, or how weather patterns relate to all life on Earth, and why, as opposed to SP, which is the salesman or conspiracy theorist. which would, to be honest, would be an interesting way to, because there's going to have to be something she's going to have to find out about all these mates, because in this particular romance that we appear to be writing, and to be honest, I would rather write, because it's personal and I don't have to fall back to a sci-fi or fantasy unless I want to. Is the SP conspiracy theorist is is revealed to be a dead ender of sorts for her any sort of relationship she would have. She'd have to give herself over to the conspiracy in order to have him. And this conspiracies are like that. In that, if you really don't believe them, then you're not really going to like the people that do for certain conspiracies. And you can take a look and I'm not talking about like the reptoid theories or the moon landing theories or the flat earthers, who can be kind of normal in everyday life. They just kind of believe a thing that really isn't true. And there's no way to convince them otherwise because they will create their own world. It's just that it's dangerous because often they come about to be wanting to be aggressive about that and prove it to other people. And when they can't, they get frustrated and sometimes violent. So there's that. What are we missing for there? SJ, NT, NF, or SP. I think we've got the personality types covered. What I don't know is who is Kelly? She's a blank slate, which is not unusual for romances, where you want the audience to be able to identify with her in some way. It works. I don't particularly enjoy it. I'd like her to have some personality. I'd like her to be relatable in a positive way, rather than just be the girl who gets depressed and then has to choose between a werewolf and a vampire. Not naming any names here. The um, that's often the case. She's a blank slate. And to be honest, I don't know anything about her other than her father died, and that she owns a car and rents a house. House, owned, a car. Oh, there's one more we could do. The car salesman. Um, so that's SP or NT. Car salesman, which would be funny as just kind of a even a comedy relief persona, because you think about this the stereotypical car salesman, and often they're played for laughs on screen, or played as the villain, or played as a minor foil for a lot of things. But on the other hand, if you know people who actually take pride in their work of selling the right car, selling a good car to other people. I know a gentleman who happens to share my name, who, well, first name anyway, that he's a great car salesman. And yes, he has some of the same traits of wanting to sell you and trying to convince you of the positive benefits of the car. But he's also not afraid to tell you about the negatives. When I went to buy my car from him, for example, he's like, well, this car doesn't have a lot of great traction in back, and you're going to want to watch it in winter. And he was absolutely right about that. Um, Moreover, the place that he worked for was pretty high end, so even though I was buying a used car, it was a good used car. It was not yet a lemon market. They were not trying to sell me something that broke down just a couple thousand miles later. I mean, the first major part I had to replace was an alternator, and that was after like 40,000 miles. And there you go. I mean, I can't ask more from my car except that it's technically labeled a station wagon, which broke my heart when I saw my registration come in, because I had always thought it's a crossover. It's a vehicle, just happens to have more space in the back. It's technically a station wagon, but that's fine. I haul stuff in it sometimes for friends, which I'm going to be doing in about an hour and a half, to help somebody move, right in the middle of the COVID crisis here. We'll see how that goes. They haven't shut down the roads yet. They haven't done draconian measures. Neither she nor I nor the others appear to be sick, and we're going to keep it that way. So we'll help her move and go from there. But that's my life. Rents a house, owns a car, father died, poor previous love choices, because that's kind of a prerequisite. for much of this. Much of romance is a woman trying to get over something else and having issues or problems. The other way to go from it is she hasn't had issues before, for whatever reason, and that she's sort of new to this or what have you. But that's also kind of just a dodge where the writer's like, well, I don't want to have to pour time and personality into this. I want her to. We're going to use this to empathize with her over this. When she's an idiot, she'll call herself on it. Okay. The next question, obviously, who was her father? Now, there's lots of different father archetypes to choose from, and then, of course, subvert as we learn more about him. The most salient fact was present or absent. Which is, yeah, there's no C in absent. The C is not, the C is absent, and we're on dry land. Present or absent. And then strict or lenient. And we can't spell lenient right now. That's fine. This is what spell check is for. It's a happy little accident. No, it's just a little accident I can fix. I'm not going to go Bob Ross on this. Great guy. Loved watching him paint, but that's a misspelled word is a misspelled word. Although sometimes it can lead to fun things, like we had, what is it, metrologist up top. Somebody who says, yeah, metrologist. He studied cities. Which gives us the idea where heat blooms change weather patterns. Okay, I like this with her father. He's a metrologist. Now, which means up top we're going to have not have it be a meteorologist. Or not, at least not refer to the scientist as a meteorologist, because that will have a lot of bleed back and forth, where the reader might get the two confused and wonder what the hell is going on. It's a good axiom in any book is not to have similarly named characters, because those can be confused too readily, and unless they have the visuals to go along with it, you don't want that for the reader. I often just have characters who will not have the same letter of the same name. And I've often come at this with anime where, like, you will have characters who are very, very similarly named, and in Japanese it doesn't matter because they are very, very different, because that's the Japanese language as opposed to English. But for us, we need a solid separation. So he's a metrologist. All right, so he's a metrologist. He studied cities, uncovered something about weather patterns, boom change weather. And also, okay, so here's a little mystery. He uncovered something about weather patterns by studying them. Whether it's how, like billiard balls, like a billiard table. Cities affect one another. And new cities change all the patterns. So what we're looking at is he's seeing the big picture of the way the heat blooms from cities cause weather pattern changes, which in turn push weather around and or affect other cities and or rural areas. Let's talk about the rural areas. Change, affect one another and areas, and new cities change all the patterns. Now, what he'd be asking for is have to change or disperse whole cities to prevent. So you'd have an intensification of tornadoes, storms, etc. through. Basically, they're sweeping through alleys. Um, in constant devastation. And this will be like a constant reminder of, well, what was he working on? Why was he struck by lightning? Who stands to benefit? If he had perished? There's all questions that will have to be resolved. And again, we can get the conspiracy theorist in on this. To ratchet up the tension, even if it's a big red herring, it's important that we have the feeling of something happening, which is it's important to keep the story driving along. That our heroine is in peril of some sort. I mean, we've started up with her being imperiled, and we know something is looming, but we've got to keep that sense of urgency going. Peril, both weather and weather and human. Both weather and human born. There's as she tries to she's navigating through this hard time. Now the question is, why is she involved in this? Well, the obvious thing is why she's involved is she's the heir to her father's research. All his notes, all his equipment, his very theories are part of his estate and hers alone by his will. Okay, and now we have another plot point that has popped up. His will, find it, examine it, utilize it. Let's see, we'll have a couple complications. An old will is on file. His lawyer is away or indisposed. Indispodi? That sounds like some sort of insect. Anyway, his lawyer is away or indisposed. Must be contacted. There could be complications with contested. This will, though she is the sole direct family member, which would be the case if she had like cousins or other distant relations who all felt they should have part of the pie, and if the will isn't specific enough, it can be challenged. You get this a lot, and though it doesn't usually amount to much, it can be an effective stall tactic for us to help other elements of the story move on while she tries to sort them out. It's best to have a few balls juggling in terms of romance. So 3 things going on. Grief. Inheritance. Romance. No. No. Grief. Then romance. Inheritance. Yes. The primary drive is, of course, the grief and romance. Second is inheritance. Third is peril. Her peril. And in this, you'll see that one is essentially going to drive the other. The inheritance is the reason that the peril gave rise to the grief. The grief will transform into romance, and the romance may help her secure her inheritance. Yeah, that's a nice setup. This is definitely going to be a romance. I've done enough sci-fi and fantasy. I can still work in those elements if I need to. Or fantasy, if need be, but it's doubtful. just because I have a it's doubtful. I mean, the lightning strikes would be, yes, the one in a 100 million chance, and it's just that at the end where it was just chance that managed all this. Oh, and also I've got a good line for that. When the deputy comes to drive her off, he mentions her car stalling. No, it was struck by lightning. And her car stalling. No, it was struck by lightning. I find that unlikely. She points to her burned up car when he passes, when they pass. And this will be their connection. However strange things are, she tells the truth. And that will make him attracted to her. That's why he's attracted to her, because if this isn't just an escort quest for him. Okay. Let's. We're just about out of time here. Gonna roll back up. I'm gonna leave that in there. All right. And I'm going to put in a fix this. This is the words I use when I want to remind myself I need something to fix, so that I can search for the words and go, oh, this is what I needed to fix. Fix this. Her car be more damaged, burning until the rain puts it. So there we go. That's something I need to fix up top, where when her car is hit by lightning. I need to research. Cars and people struck by lightning. So, and that's usually the way it goes. You can only do so much research before you begin a project. If you know what you need to research ahead of time, then research that. But otherwise, once you reach the end of that, you're going to need to dig in and start writing, because your writing will inform your research as to where you need to go and what you need to know specifically. In this case, I need to know what cars and people struck by lightning are like, so that I can include those little damaging details and anecdotes, if possible, in those. But we are out of time, so this has been another episode of Alan Writes. I hope you have enjoyed this little creative sojourn. It was really more than outlining, but we're still moving along here as things go. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks.